everyone. This is Detroit Alley Cat, and you have tuned in to True Crime Tuesday. Let us see if I can get it up on Tuesday. But I have one of the craziest, I always say that, craziest. I'm going to say one of the most unique stories that I have found in a long time. And I owe that to one of my followers. Her name is Sam. So thank you, Sam. But this story borders on paranormal. Seriously. And you would think that like it was a case that a horror movie was based off of, but it's not. It's like so different. I gotta just tell you all about it for you to understand it. And it's actually very sad too, but very interesting and like all over the place. So without further ado, let's get spooky. I actually have the sign set up straight this time. Are you excited about that? Okay. So, let's talk. Okay, if you're like tuning in for the first time, my name is Detroit Alley Cat. I do all things paranormal. I do true crime. I do unboxings. I do pagan stuff. I have not been able to stay on top of my videos the last couple weeks, and I'm going to tell you why. I was going to make a video, like a little short video about it, because I was like, sometimes people don't like to hear what I have to say about myself. But I'm just gonna tell you anyway. I had surgery last week. I was out of it. It was kind of I wouldn't say a maintenance surgery, but it was just something that happened. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was a walk in, get sliced open, get stuff taken out, and walk out that very day. And yeah, here I am. I'm not feeling like 100% like perfect. So if I start drooling and staring off, you know why? I'm not going to do that. But I'm just telling you why there's only been like one video in a week. I just thought you should know. Some of you don't care. So let's get into the story. And that's cool that you don't care. I know you kind of want to care though, right? No, not really? Okay. Send me a message at like 2 a.m. telling me how much I suck. I love those. Okay. All right. So we're going to get into the case for real now. This case is the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. And I'm just going to tell you right now, we are going to talk about a case that happened in 1977. It wasn't a recent case, but this case it does have sexual assault to children in the case. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it is obviously part of the case. And there's also sexual assault of pregnant women, which is really disturbing. So if those things trigger you, or you don't like to hear about them, or they're just too much to think about, dip out. I'm not going to focus the entire thing about it, and I'm not going to go into great detail like I have in other cases, but I would hate for you to stress out about this. But I digress. If that bothers you, then thank you for coming to my channel. I'll have plenty of other content that will be really cool. But if you would like to carry on with me, let's go. Before we really jump in this case, I would just like to take a moment to mention that this case really reminds me of Camp Crystal Lake. Like seriously, it really reminds me of a horror movie. But it's a real life story. Let's talk about what happened. They say that these cases are unsolved. And in the beginning I was like, "Oh, yes, an unsolved case." But I really don't think that this case is unsolved. It's got the weirdest twist at the end. So I won't spoil it for you, but I will tell you that it does have a twist. Camp Scott is located in Mays County, Oklahoma. Now, something I got to find out about researching this case is Oklahoma is home to a whole lot of indigenous people, especially the Cherokee tribes. It's something that I wasn't aware of and I got to find out about, and it's something that's important to this case. And I will tell you why a little bit later. Camp Scott is this little tiny camp. It's really cute. It was basically made for the Girl Scouts, and I think it would have been a really cool place to visit prior to the murders because they have these tents and it's like these old-fashioned tents where it's not you know how am I calling them tents? They're really cabins. But the reason I'm calling them tents is because they don't have logs. They have tarps hung over them, and I've seen these before in Boy Scout tents and stuff, and each of these tents fits for, I'm calling it tents again, but it's really cabins. Each of these cabins fits 4 campers to each of them, and so it's kind of exciting for the kids because they get to go stay in their own little tiny house. However, after I tell you this story, it will be terrifying for any parent to let any of their children stay in these little cabins because this story didn't end up well. And the thing is that there was a main hall where the kids ate, and then there were other little cabins where the counselors stayed. And this is the thing they did every summer. It was 1977. Kids often went off to these camps and they did all these summer activities. It was kind of like a normal thing for so many families. And this camp in particular was geared towards little girls. I believe one of the streets was called Cookie Street. It was very cute. It was very Girl Scout, and a lot of kids get really excited to go to this. The thing is right before they decide to have all these campers come onto the area to camp, they do a training thing, especially with counselors, because a lot of these counselors are 18, 19 years old. So they have to make sure that the counselors know what they're doing. They had all the counselors come to Camp Scott and they're doing a dry run or they're training or whatever. And something happened and this is 2 months prior to all of the kids coming to go camping. Something happened while they were training for the real run through. It appeared that one of the camp counselors, their stuff got ransacked. It got gone through. And the strange thing is it was a box of donuts. And the box of donuts was empty. There was no donuts in it. And inside of the box of donuts, there was a note inside of it. And the note stated, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1." And that's something to take note on, is that this campsite had 8 tents. There was tent 1, 2, 3, 4, down the road. And they said that they were going to kill the girls in tent 1, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. This note inside of the donut box, it was kind of treated like a prank, and they didn't take it seriously, which I think was a big bad judgment on their part. They didn't even tell the parents. They didn't tell anyone that this happened, and they just threw the note away. Right around June 12th, all the campers started heading to Camp Scott to go on their little camping trip, their little Girl Scout camping trip. It was June 12th, 1977, and it was extremely it was thunderstorming and raining. Around 7 o'clock, they had to send all the girls into their tents, and they had to stay put in their tents. So usually they would have activities that they would do, but they couldn't do that because it was raining. All the little girls were huddled up in their tents. They were writing letters to their parents. They were talking. They were telling stories. They were getting ready to go to bed. What's interesting is tent 8 is the tent that was the farthest from where the counselors could see. It was just like right out of sight. So it was all the way around the corner and there was something blocking it. I'm pretty sure it was the Great Hall or something like that. But the counselors could not see number tent 8. And in tent 8 was Laura Lee Farmer. She was 8 years old. She was actually one of the youngest campers in the whole entire camp. There was Doris Denise Milner. She was 10 years old. And then there was Michelle Heather Gousset, and she was 9 years old. There was supposed to be a fourth camper in the little cabin, but because of a clerical error, the fourth camper ended up being in another cabin, which actually ended up saving the other camper's life. The girls were huddled in the tent. The thunderstorm was going down, and they decided to write their parents a letter. Doris Milner's letter to her mother. Dear Mom, I don't like camp. It's awful. The first day it rained, I have 3 new friends, Linda, Lori, and Michelle. Lori and Michelle are my roommates. Mom, I don't want to stay at camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home and I want to see Casey and everybody. Your loving child, Denise Milner. And this is something that her mother read and she would think about for a very long time. And something else that happened before Denise Milner even went to the camp is that she sat down and talked to her mother about death. She actually asked her mother, like, she said, Mom, what would happen if I died? Or what would happen if somebody died? And her mother said, well, every day somebody is born. So people die and there are new people that are born. And this isn't like word for word. And she basically said, like, anytime somebody dies, a new person is born, and that is like the circle of life. Denise looked at her mother and asked her, well, Mom, what would happen if everybody died tomorrow? And her mother was like really taken aback by that question. And what was really strange is that the next day, everybody in that cabin ended up dying. And it was kind of like, I almost feel like a premonition that Denise had that something was going to happen. And I do go back and forth from calling her Denise and Doris, but her name was Doris Denise Milner. But a lot of people did call her Denise. Now, something that was very interesting about these 3 girls is that one of them was the daughter of a police officer, the other was a daughter of a doctor, and another one was a daughter of a businessman. So these were kind of like, I wouldn't say like famous children, but their parents were influential. At 6 a.m. on June 13, a camp counselor was on her way to the showers. She was trying to get to the showers as fast as possible. That way she could get a shower before it got busy in there. And she noticed a sleeping bag that was laying in the middle of the forest. So she went up to the sleeping bag and she opened it up and she noticed there was a child in the sleeping bag and the child was no longer breathing. Immediately, they called the authorities, and they had actually found out that all 3 girls from Tent 8 had been taken out of their cabins, and they had been bludgeoned, they had been strangled, and they had been murdered and raped. And 2 of them were inside of their sleeping bags, and the other one was underneath a sleeping bag, and the sleeping bag was like haphazardly put on top of the girl. When you went inside of the cabin, it appeared that there was like blood everywhere, and the person who had committed the crime had like basically taken like the sheets from the bed and used the sheets from the bed to try to clean up the blood and then shoved them inside of the sleeping bags that the girls were in. At that point, the camp was completely shut down. All of the Girl Scouts were evacuated and sent back home. And it was kind of sad because the parents of these girls did not even know which girls had been killed. They were waiting for their children to get there. And the 3 sets of parents that were parents to these kids. Like, they were like, as soon as the kids got there, the cops came and they sat them down and they told them what had happened. Some of the things that they found out was whoever had done this murder or this crime had actually hit up some of the other tents and had gone around trying on their glasses and trying to like they tried on the glasses and then they put the glasses back down, and it's almost like the perpetrator was trying to find a pair of glasses that fit his prescription. And then something else that came to light was the duct tape that was used to duct tape the girls' hands together. They found out that this duct tape was traced to a farmhouse that was just down the street from the Camp Scott. Once the investigation got started, one of the prime suspects was a man. His name was Gene Leroy Hart. And something important to note is Gene was a 100% Cherokee, and Gene Leroy Hart was part of the Cherokee tribe, which was indigenous in that area. And the thing about Gene Leroy Hart was an escaped felon from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. And he was actually convicted of raping two pregnant women, and he was guilty of committing burglary around the area. And what's funny, I wouldn't say it was funny, but what's something to note, that's like my favorite saying, by the way, is that he was known for trying on women's glasses and seeing if the prescription fit them. And if they did, he stole them. I almost would have to say that women's glasses, is kind of like his trophy, but that's just me speculating. I'm not sure. When they started doing some more investigation, this is where it starts to get a little paranormal. When they started getting more deep into the investigation, they decided to get these two famous tracking dogs. I guess they were called the Wonder Dogs. They were known as the Wonder Dogs because they actually had just cracked a case 8 months ago, and they were known as wonderful tracking dogs. Now, there was a Cherokee medicine man in the area, and he basically placed a curse on the dogs, which I think is very sad. And he said that they would soon die. Apparently, because Gene Leroy Hart was Cherokee, they didn't want him to be convicted of this crime, so this Cherokee medicine man was like, I'm just gonna place a curse on these tracking dogs. And a lot of people thought it was like pretty funny, like, a curse from a Cherokee man, like that's really gonna do damage. But within the week, one of the dogs had a heart attack. And everyone was like, you know what? This dog had a heart attack because of the heat. And maybe that did happen, but it's kind of a coincidence, I think. And then to top it off, on top of that, a couple months later, the second dog ended up running in front of a vehicle and getting hit. And it just seems a little bit crazy that a Cherokee medicine man put a curse on these dogs and they both died within a couple of months. This is where I think it gets a little bit paranormal, and everybody was kind of like just saying that it was a coincidence, but there was an agent that took this very serious. His name was Agent Harvey Pratt, and Harvey Pratt was a full-blooded Cheyenne Arapaho. If I got that wrong, I'm sorry. Seriously. I'm very sorry. But the thing is that Agent Harvey Pratt, he knew about all this medicine man stuff, and he was a full believer in it, even though he was 100% a Christian. And a story that I really like that Harvey Pratt had, is that he felt like there was going to be a lot of things that happened in this case that were going to be hard to deal with. And he said he had medicine from a medicine man, and he wanted to open his mind and ask for help from the spirits. So the thing that I like is that Agent Harvey Pratt, he was a 100% believer of this medicine man thing, and he was also a Christian, but he had received some medicine from a medicine man, and he wanted to use it as guidance. And so he went out and he started a fire, and he started to do his thing where he smoked the substance to get guidance. And the other officers came and they were like, "Can I participate in this ritual that you're doing?" And he decided that, that he thought that it was very respectful, and he thought it was great that the officers wanted to do it. So he took the medicine that he had and he threw it onto the fire because he felt like the smoke would just like waft all over the place. So he took a bunch of cigarettes and he ripped the filter off, and he said it's because that way the tobacco could be used as something to smoke and share, and that would give everybody guidance. So they stood around this fire that he had thrown medicine into the fire, and they smoked, and he said they became brothers that night. And as they were doing that, there was a break in the case. They had found a cave with evidence, and it happened right when they were doing that. And he said it was a very powerful moment because he felt like the other officers all of a sudden began to understand that there were things that happen that you couldn't explain. And I just thought it was a really cool story. I probably hacked it up to pieces, but I just thought it was really cool. And this was a indigenous person, and they were doing a ritual for guidance, and they all came together, and I just thought it was special because you don't hear about that happening often. And they were all law enforcement, which is kind of that is special. It's worth noting, okay? So they went to this cave, and they looked in this cave, and they found some things, okay? They found glasses taken from the counselor's tent, pics of a woman, they found women's underwear, and what they were really looking at were these pics of these women. So they tried to figure out, like, okay, if we can like figure out where these pictures are from, then we can prove who this suspect is. And they actually ended up identifying one of the women in the picture. And the woman in the picture, her picture had been taken by a sheriff that had worked at the Oklahoma penitentiary, and as a side job, he was a wedding photographer, and he actually had Jean Leroy Hart develop the pictures. So this tied Jean Leroy Hart to the cave. This tied him to the area, Camp Scott, because of the glasses that were taken, and it all just started to come together. When they started to figure out that Jean Leroy Hart was their prime suspect, and they were starting to figure out that this man was the man that most definitely committed these murders, they found out that Jean Leroy Hart actually took off, and he was staying with another medicine man. There are a lot of medicine men in this story, so I just want you to realize that, this area had a lot of tribes, and this is kind of like a common thing. But I was listening to the interview and it said that these medicine men, you can go there and if you're like in trouble or something, they're not going to ask you, they're not going to judge you for something like that, and they will let you stay with them, no questions asked. And that is pretty much what was happening. Jean Leroy Hart was staying with one of these medicine men. So the detectives or the agents found out about this, and they actually got the medicine man's wife and they interviewed her, and they like, I don't know if I agree with this, but they did it. They kind of put like pressure on the medicine man's wife and was like, if you don't tell us what's going on or where this man is, you guys are going to get in trouble and all this stuff is going to happen. And so she gave him up. She basically told the agent, like, hey, this is where they are. And of course, the agents went to this unmarked location that they would have never found. And it was like a cabin out in the woods. And they went there and they found him. They found Jean Leroy Hart, and they took him into custody. They had some problems when they like took this man, Jean Leroy Hart. We're gonna call him Hart for right now because it's just easier. The thing is that Jean Leroy Hart, he had a vasectomy. And the problem with this is that if he had a vasectomy, then there would be no sperm. And in the three young girls, there was sperm. So how could somebody who had a vasectomy put sperm into the young victims? Something that really helped tie him into all of this, besides the pictures, is when they went to the medicine man's house to arrest him. When they found Jean Leroy Hart, they found him actually wearing a pair of female glasses. And they were a pair of the camp counselor's glasses. So it kind of was like, there's so much that tied him into this. But like I said, this area was very, I had a lot of indigenous people, First Nation tribes. So there were a lot of people that were like watching this case, and they felt that law enforcement was trying to chase this man down and pin this crime on him because he was an indigenous man. And I will agree that when I saw the amount of time that he had gotten for raping two pregnant women, thought it was a lot of time. Raping a pregnant woman is a heinous crime. It's a heinous crime. But I think he got like 308 years. I don't know. I've seen people commit murder that didn't even get 20 years, and he got 308 years. So I can see where these people would think that because he was an indigenous tribe member, that he was being picked on. However, I also think that Jean Leroy Hart might have been taking advantage of this, because when they first picked him up from the medicine man's house, they asked him, like, hey, did you do this? Did you kill these three little girls? And his response was, you'll never pin it on me. It's a very complicated situation. I don't think that this was a good man. But let's keep going into the story because it gets even better. When they picked up Jean Leroy Hart, I believe they did some tests on him and got some bodily fluids on him. And they actually found that he had sperm and that his vasectomy seemed like it didn't take. So there was a possibility that he could have done this, but they weren't for sure. Also, they decided that after they went ahead and arrested him, that they were going to go back to the cabin that he was found at, the medicine man's cabin, and they were going to do a search. So when they went back to the cabin and they did a search of it, they ended up finding a blue mirror and a corn cob pipe. And the reason why this is so important is because these two objects, they actually belong to a camp counselor at Camp Scott, which is something else that tied this man to Camp Scott and these murders. So there's so many things that tie this man to it. They decide that they're going to take him and they're going to go ahead and prosecute him for these three crimes. And while they were in court, immediately the first thing that they noticed is that there were four medicine men in the court. And they're sitting there and they're like doing their thing. And they're basically trying to I don't know if they're trying to intimidate the prosecution or do their mystical ritual thing to make sure that you know, the prosecution doesn't win. But I just think it's kind of crazy. Can you imagine being in a courtroom with a medicine man, with medicine, doing their thing, to ensure that they're not going to win? It is kind of extraordinary if you ask me. And the thing is that this part is going to be rough because I can see where a lot of people would think that this was like a racial thing, but the fact of the matter is they had so much evidence that piled up that showed that Leroy Hart was guilty. However, the people of that area did not feel that way. And they actually ended up talking about Leroy Hart and treating him like he was a hero. They had the victims' families said that when they went to go out to eat, there would be jars set up with pictures of Leroy Hart's face on there. And it was like a jar that said, please help us raise money for the defense team for Leroy Hart. And it just seemed oh, and they also did these interviews where they asked Leroy Hart if he felt like he was a hero. Listen, this man is a pedophile and he raped children, and they're asking him if he feels like he's a hero. It's just a rough story. During the whole court case, it came out that there were hair samples found in the victims that matched Leroy Hart. The sperm that was in let's say fluids. The fluids that was found in the victims also matched Leroy Hart. And there was a whole bunch of other circumstantial evidence. And unfortunately, because the area the area felt like they needed to protect him because he was Cherokee, he was found innocent. And this was this was this this is a this is just a crazy story because they had so much evidence that said that he wasn't innocent, but the jurors found him innocent. The night before, the sheriff actually felt like Hart was going to get off, and he was having a really hard time dealing with this inside. He wanted to know if this man was really guilty. So the sheriff ended up going to his own medicine man, and he was like, you know what? I need to know if this man gets off, if he's innocent or he's guilty. This medicine man's name was Crying Wolf. And Crying Wolf talked about this much more eloquently than I can, but he basically said that one of the rituals he did was that the accused had to stand on the blood of the victims. And if he was innocent, he would be fine. But if he was not innocent, that he would find his reckoning. Crime Wolf said it so much different, but I just interpreted it into Detroit Alley Cat terms. And I guess 4 was a very powerful number in this ritual. And he said you need to let what happens happen. So when Jean Leroy Hart was found innocent, the sheriff was really upset. He was I can't believe this happened, but he remembered what Crying Wolf had said. And so, there's all these happy outcries that are happening in the courtroom. Now remember, this is a man got off, and there's evidence that he killed, raped, bludgeoned 3 little girls. And that's not even talking about the fact that he raped 2 pregnant women and burglarized neighborhoods. This man killed 3 innocent little girls, and the courtroom's like breaking out in happiness. They had to take Leroy Hart back to Oklahoma Penitentiary because he had to serve the remainder of his like huge amount of time that he got for raping the pregnant women, 308 days. This is the part that I feel, I'm gonna call it paranormal, but I don't know. I'll let you make the decision. He's outside, and it is June 4th, okay? June 4th, 1979. He is out, and this is just a couple months after he was found innocent of killing those 3 little girls. He was outside, he's working out, he's pumping iron, because that's what felons do. They go out there and they work out. And all of a sudden, he stands up and he falls dead. And this is like literally 2 months after the court case. And, he had a heart attack, and that is the causes of why he fell dead. But Crying Wolf, the medicine man the sheriff went to, said he was not innocent and he had to face what he did. And he lied about what he did. And the fact that it happened on June 4th, it was a very powerful and it was a very significant day for this event of Jean Leroy Hart dying. That was like that case. It was so cool, and I hate to say it was so cool to learn about because I felt so conflicted. Like, I really like to do a lot of cases about Indigenous people, because this case, it was about Indigenous people, and it was about Indigenous people standing up for what's right. I just thought it was so interesting learning about medicine men, and I know that I call it paranormal, but it's more spiritual than anything. And yes, this case till this day says that it is a unsolved case because they never found out who actually did this. But I'm about to tell you something really quick because this is cool too. All right. After all of this went down and Jean Leroy Hart died, they did an autopsy, and they found out that his vasectomy was unsuccessful. 12 years after Jean Leroy Hart died, they decided that they were going to go ahead and do DNA testing, because the DNA testing that they had 12 years after this crime was committed was so completely different than when it happened. And when they did that, the DNA testing proved that Jean Leroy Hart was guilty. When they found this man innocent, he actually was guilty, and it took 12 years to prove it. And here's something else that I found I think you should know. Jean Hart's funeral was the largest in Mays County. Now this is someone who's guilty of pedophilia. He's a murderer, he's a rapist, and he's a thief. I feel like thief is like the last, like, who cares? But it's still in there. Jean Hart's funeral was the largest in Mays County. 1,300 people attended, and the funeral was 3.5 miles long. This story, whew, crazy, right? You end up thinking it's going to be about like the camp, which, don't get me wrong, Camp Scott is still standing today, and it definitely would be a great place to have a horror movie filmed. But I feel like it's just left there because of all the horrific crime that happened. And honestly, all these things that I talked about, the 3 things that got lost in the mix was the fact that these 3 little girls lost their lives, and they had their whole lives ahead of them. And I, I just, I just want to take a moment to remember them. And I don't know what you think about this story. I thought it was a very interesting story to learn about. I enjoyed it. It made me really sad that three little girls lost their lives. It made me really sad for the two pregnant women. It just, I enjoyed learning about the culture. I always love learning about Indigenous culture. But yeah, so that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, if I told you it well, please think about subscribing, think about sticking around. And as always, stay safe and stay spooky. Bye.